So good afternoon, and this is one of the last lecture in a series of sustainable exploitation. And so far we have seen how we can reduce the wastage by improving shelf life, employing different technologies, and biotransformation, whether to convert completely new biomass into different value-added products or byproducts or co-products or waste into different streams. Now, this is one of the example related to again macroalgae, where zero waste approach can be established, and all the way from raw material to the final product and different streams what can be obtained, and similar type of biorefinery approach for wheat, rice, n number of crops can be established. So what we'll do in this case is we just talk about biotransformation, value addition, some of the examples. So what is the main aim of using seaweed? As many of you might be familiar with micro and macroalgae, they have a huge amount of benefits and different nutrients which can be obtained from a macroalgae. So whether it's fiber, cellulose, or usage as a whole seaweed, either in the form of green powder or in form of tablet. As you would have seen, some of the commercial companies are also making tablets from spirulina or other microalgae. Similar approach can be adopted for seaweed as well. Lipids, protein, peptides, oligosaccharides, pigments, and phenolics. So, and all these extracts, whatever is present in the seaweed, they have a range of different benefits and can be used for functional food ingredients as well as nutraceuticals or pharmaceuticals. I'm not going to go into any of those benefits one by one, but for that, you can look into any of those standard review paper or a book where these benefits are very well outlined. Now, what is the challenge as a processor? The biggest challenge what we see as a processor is how do we achieve or release these compounds at a scalable way. That means what technology we should use and how best we can bring that into a commercial scale. Although optimization, investigations, and a lot of lower TRL, lower technology readiness level techniques are ongoing at a research level, but this is the biggest grand challenge. How do we get these at a scalable way? Now, if you just go back a bit on the seaweed itself, what is the relevance of this seaweed in for humans? Now, if you look at seaweed product, this is an example from Irish famine of 1845. That was the condition when potato, being a staple crop in the country, was infected by Cercospora potato blight, and there was no food available. And same as for in India, staple crop is wheat and rice. Same way for Ireland, staple crop is potatoes. So when this was not available and it was surrounded by sea, and this was dulse or Palmaria palmata or the seaweed, which was used as carrageenan to make different food products. And as time progressed, and this was never used as a food product, even our Japanese, Koreans, and Chinese colleagues, they do use seaweed a lot in different products, whether it's a sushi, or like covering of a sushi, or range of different food products coming out of seaweed. And some of these carrageenans or carrageenans, alginates are also used as an ingredient in ice cream and different food products as a food ingredients. Now, on the other side, now some of the commercial products which are available in the market, which are based on seaweed, for example, Irish moss, seaweed pie, and these are some of the European products, even the crackers coming out of it. Even the Pringles is having stuff, seaweed included in it. So this has taken a lot of now renewed interest in coming into new product, both as a culinary application as well as into whole product development. One of the example over here, as you can see, even extruded snacks is having certain level of good benefit of seaweed into extruded product. And although this particular extrusion was carried out only for doing some of those bioprocessing as well as for extraction of compounds, at the same time, this can also been included into different some of the product with X percentage written here because this is gone a bit commercial at the moment. So these are the way how different types of product can be used. using a whole biomass itself. So in every case, we do not need to extract it when the whole compound itself can be used. This is very similar to when we use whole wheat flour to make a chapatis or a bread. Now, if you look at the marine sources, and if you see whatever is there whatever is written as blue around it, these are the areas where most of seaweeds are grown, and the aquaculture, as you can see, near Japan and China, near Australia. Nothing is seen near India. The only reason is aquaculture still, it just started, and as you can see in this video, how the seaweed is grown, whether it's wild harvest or aquaculture. When we say wild harvest, that means it just grows on its own, as you can see from these images, and these are just collected. And or else aquaculture, where you see a rope where the spores of the seaweed are tied in and thrown into the water. And at the bottom of the sea, you see all these plants. These are all seaweeds, which is having a lot of different, which not only act as a food for aquatic animals, but also grows indiscriminately. And this is one of the way how CO2 can be sequestered by growing these seaweeds. So as far as coastline is concerned, for every country there is maritime territory. For example, Irish coastline is only 7,700 kilometers, whereas marine territory is having huge amount of area. And even 10% of this area is converted into aquaculture production. And on an average, at least for 1 hectare of sea farm, you can obtain up to 3 to 7 tons of that particular biomass. So this is one of the biomass what Europe has moved towards to unlocking the potential of seas. And a lot of initiatives have already been started in India as well to grow this aquaculture seaweed. And as you can see from this particular video, how these seaweed plants look like. And this particular video was created for school kids to show what the seaweeds are. And so if you look into what is the economic importance of importance of seaweed globally. And if you see in a global perspective, China, that is with Asia having 97% of seaweed utilization or produced internationally. And among this, only China, Indonesia, Philippines, and Korean countries and Japan are involved in it, how important it is, whereas Europe is having only 1% of share. Out of that, Canada, South America, as well as some of the coast, and Norway is another leading one for seaweed industry. So what is economic relevance? First is biomass exploitation. That means it produces a lot of key ingredients. That these are polysaccharides, which are also known as fiber, that is dietary fiber. Food and supplements rich in protein, low in fat, rich in minerals and dietary fiber. Feed ingredient, fertilizers, and having low-grade plastic. Pharmaceutical, cosmeceuticals, nutraceuticals, and biofuels. A huge number of importance are there when it comes to economy. That's biomass. Second is environmental benefit. It captures CO2 and inorganic waste product. That means it is carbon neutral or carbon negative. Higher yield compared to land cultivation because you don't need to compete for fresh water, and it does not need any nutrients if it is grown in a sea. Ecosystem services, that is coastal ecosystem services, avoids erosion and all those erosions, as well as avoid having flood-like situation. So that means it controls the flood and a lot of other benefits. I'm not going to go into ecological services of that. And at the same time, carbon sequestering, that is sequester the CO2 into it. So three important things here is how we balance 3 E's. What are they? One is economy. That means we need alternative sources, whether it's food, feed, or fuel purpose. Maintain environment and maintain ecosystem. So how this can be balanced? And this can be easily balanced again to having alternative on-farm processes, disruptive technologies, or adopting a zero-waste approach. So all these 3 together again benefits for long-term sustainable developmental goals. So what are the key benefits of growing macroalgae or seaweeds? As you can see, this is a particular normal rope which is seeded with the spores of a seaweed, and then this is thrown into the water. As you can see in the third figure, as you can see in the third figure, this is a normal floating ball and this is a rope where this particular rope is thrown in, and after 4 to 6 months, you see something like this. Seaweed is growing and these ropes are pulled and these plants are cut, and these can grow up to 1.5 to 3 meters or up to 2 meters long. So as you can see, this is correct statistics. Marine primary producers, the plant can sequester up to 50 to 71% of carbon. So whatever the possible carbon is, it is fixed in a form of polysaccharides. So the carbon sequestering potential is way too high. For example, it can be up to 36 to 500 tons of CO2 per hectare per annum. So this shows, if you look into marine territory, and if you are growing these plants, it can create that biomass which can be used for a range of different purposes. So that is the reason that is one of the reasons why shift has been going towards macroalgae, because there are no inputs required to grow. A. B. It can be grown organically because they're not adding any fertilizer. C. It produces a good amount of biomass for a range of different applications, and at the same time, it sequesters huge amount of carbon dioxide. So here, again, so far what we were talking about in first 2 or 3 days was all about reduce. Now we'll focus a bit more again on biotransformation, either by transforming the raw material into value-added product or adding value to the existing process. What does it mean? We'll see it from next few examples. Now, what is really required for sustainable exploitation? This is one of the biorefinery approach, where we are talking about circularity in it. This is aquaculture, seaweed, or wild harvest, having innovative conversion systems, whether it's drying using microwave, RF, or ohmic heating, or hydrodynamic cavitation for conversion into value-added compounds, and then to fractionate those and develop multi-product biorefinery. And whatever is not used can go for biogas, and then looking for different applications. For example, feed, food, drug, skincare, additives, as well as whole food. So, and then all these carbon sinks. So this will have a complete biorefinery with creating different value chains and residues. Now, if you look into the seaweed itself, different value productions. Seaweed, whether it's whatever way it is harvested, whether it is mechanically harvested or having a manual harvest, processing 1, processing 2, and then adding economic value, the lowest one as an energy. That means if you use the whole biomass for production of energy, low value compound. And if you have a fractionation for different compounds, you can add value to the raw material. You go for nutraceuticals or pharmaceutical, which are high value, or cosmeceuticals, food and feed, or fertilizer. And these are the different steps which can be involved in this particular raw material. And then how, when we talk about this particular marine spokes, this, when I say about BioOrbic, this is again SFI Bioeconomy Research Center, how we are exploiting this along with the companies. These are the 3 companies who are attached with this type of program, and this is nearly about 13.5 million euros program to come. The real benefit not only includes fundamental research, applied research, but also scaling up and industrial applications for a range of different products. This you will see in next coming slides. Now, so to make bio-based economy, research institution along with an industry coming up with the multi-stock biorefineries for feed, food, pharma, cosmeceuticals, and various biochemicals. These are bio-based value chains to come up with cooperative commercialization. That means research carried out along with the industry to scale it up to obtain different value chains. Now, I'll quickly go through some of the value chains. First one is whole seaweed. Conditioning with the moisture, suppose is extruded. That extruded seaweed mixed with other ingredient is suitable for cattle feed or a fish feed, or even that raw material is suitable for using it for insect feed to grow either black soldier fly or to grow cricket flower through insect rearing and creating insect meal. And together with the seaweed plus insect, which goes as for chicken feed. Because if you see in chickens, they also need good source of calcium, and this calcium also can come from the insects, as because they do have a good amount of calcium in it, and it acts as a chicken feed which can be used for human food application. This is a value chain. Within that other value chain is extruded seaweeds used directly as a bakery product, which I showed the first example over there, or having snacks as an extruded snacks, or having those ingredients for soup mixes. So this is an again direct food application. Other one is wet conversion, when a seaweed which is having 60 to 70% or well 70+% moisture this is dislodged into different water soluble and insoluble fraction, and they are for example soluble fraction value chain 3 and 4, which is on the next slide, plus proteins and alginates and dietary fiber for different supplements it can be used, and whatever is residue goes for biogas, which in turn is used for using different value chains. So this is what shows extrusion, dry conversion, and a wet conversion. Now here hydrodynamic cavitation, when I said about value chain 3 and 4, residues we just saw we can use it for protein and fiber application. Soluble fraction, if we classify into high molecular weight or low molecular weight fractions, and high molecular weight fractions is coidin, laminarins, and different amino acids, followed by this again residue for biogas. Low molecular weight fractions, that is fermentable sugar, and this seaweeds a very good source of mannitol. And interestingly, one of the process was converting mannitol into there's another sugar alcohol, because mannitol is very similar to xylitol, but with different properties which can be converted into sugar alcohol, and some of those extract can be used for biostimulant. So these are some of the value chains, how a simple biomass can be converted into range of different value added products. So if you see the complete chain, aquaculture, that's macroalgae. Example is quoted again for these three. Why these three seaweeds are listed here? Because these are very relevant for European waters. Conversion, dry or a wet. Extrusion, that is feed or a food application. Wet, hydrodynamic cavitation, that means food additives, proteins, alginates, dietary fiber. Bioactives, fucoidin, laminarin, amino acids. Biochemicals, mannitol, biostimulant, fermented sugars, which can be converted again into 2,3-butanediol or succinic acid. And this is what is the latest work which is ongoing to have a complete biorefinery concept for seaweed. And if you take any biomass, whether it's tomato, potato, or any other agriculture crop or a cereal crop or pulses, and think in that perspective how we can generate a biorefinery concept, take one thing at a time and develop a process, and to see what is coming in. That is again similar concept of traceability, one step forward and one step backward. And then based on that, we can develop a complete biorefinery and come up with an approach to have a zero waste approach. So that was the whole concept of demonstrating how zero waste approach can be obtained with judicious selection of a technology. You don't have to use a technology everywhere, depending upon need. Now, so once we have a biorefinery concept developed, then what also is required to see is what are the legislative aspects associated with it. So whatever three seaweeds what I mentioned, this is all the countries where they're grown: UK, France, Ireland, Faroe Islands, Sweden, and different countries are there. So legislation associated with macroalgae, one itself is Common Fisheries Policy. Alien species regulation, that means we cannot just introduce any seaweed. This is true for almost every country. Recommendations how we monitor the iodine in seaweed. This is quite interesting because most of the diets over there have a huge amount of iodine, whereas some of our diets here have less of iodine. That's why we use iodized salt. Whereas other places there is excessive amount of iodine because diet is related to marine fish and other products. And there are some of the directives related to maritime, directives related to strategies, water framework for as affect to certain public and private projects on the environment, that means environmental directives, regulations, compliance with the NEOGA protocol, that means they how if we indiscriminately start growing the seaweeds in the water, are we disturbing ecological sorry, marine ecology, marine environment. This is NEOGA, this is a Japanese one protocol which has to be followed. Compliance related to that, regulation related to novel food, but we were covering yesterday, and habitat directive. So all these are the directives associated with this, and similar type of legislative legislations, regulations, directives, and recommendations are there for almost every crop, whatever is used for human food application. So biotransformation example was over here, as what we have already seen in the morning. That means primary, secondary, and tertiary processing, how it can be converted. So that was all related to biotransformation. Well, another example to quote when it comes to value addition. So what does it mean by value addition? If you look at this particular process, which includes pre-extraction, neutralization, and purification and precipitation, this is a classical process of alginate production from seaweed. So as you can see, the normal process include dried biomass, and this particular process is not a confidential process. This is freely available even on FAO document, and process didn't change for last 50 to 60 years for alginates. So dried biomass, adding acid or alkali to make insoluble alginic acid. Alkali is added in, sodium carbonate or sodium hydroxide, get sodium alginate, either to use sodium alginate precipitation to obtain this way, to add calcium chloride to it to get calcium alginate, or alginic acid through flocculation. So this is the process for alginate. When it comes to agar extraction, which I was showing you other day, where you have a seaweed, you boil it for 6 to 7 hours at 90+ degrees Celsius. All the agar is solubilized in the water at hot water, and then you cool the water and you get the gel, you dry it, you get agar. So this is normal process. And how do we add value to this? Because whatever the byproduct we obtain from this particular chemical process, we cannot use it for food purpose because that will contain a lot of different types of chemical. Even though this is slightly greener process, because methanol or not methanol, sorry, it's one of the chemical is used here to make things alginates as whiter, as in one of the organic solvent is used. That makes it formic acid, sorry, yeah. Formic acid is used to make it white. And especially in China and Korea, these type of chemicals are also used. And then it makes all other byproduct useless. So how do we add value to it, and what approach we are taking? The three: one is greening the process, coming up with a zero waste approach, and utilizing every fraction. First one here is drying of seaweed. To develop energy efficient drying techniques, or using the fresh biomass by stabilizing the fresh biomass and using the fresh biomass. That is the first step of greening the process. As you can see, red lines of the process became green. So first one itself is how do we make energy efficient drying process, or instead of using a dried seaweed, we can use a fresh biomass. That reduces the cost of production. Second, when acid is added here, if we have a greener acid, I won't name it what is used here because of commercially sensitive information. And then that particular ingredients, what we get, a good source of laminarin because it is soluble in acidified water, chlorotannins, that is phenolics, and amino acids, which are good source for flavor enhancers like umami flavors. A lot has been published, and we ourselves have published a lot related to that. And then this is one of the utilization, this fraction, which is currently goes as a waste. Third step, this algal residue, what it contains is mainly proteins and fibers. This is again a waste. If we are using formic acid or some of those harsh chemical over here, we cannot make use of this algal residue, which is dumped and creates environmental issues. Third step over here is solvent extraction. That means how we replace this particular solvent. Normally this particular solvent, some cases ethanol is added, that is alcohol, to precipitate the polysaccharides. Instead of using alcohol, which is having again some of those health and safety and occupational health and safety issues, to replace the solvent or to use a membrane technology to remove those alginates. So by doing so, we are greening the process, utilizing every fraction and making it possible only by replacing the harmful chemical whichever is used in a process. So if any given extraction process, for whether it's a commercially employed, forget about the seaweed for the moment and go for any extraction systems, and you see the process and systematically think what all fractions can be utilized and how this can be exploited, or what technologies can be used to green the process and add value to different fractions. So what was carried out was basically, again, this particular process, what I already covered this morning session. And as you can see with this particular industry, seaweed, and this website itself is nutramara.com, and these are all the ingredients which are now commercially available: fucoidin, algal fiber, omega oil, that is again oil coming out from seaweeds, different colors, and these are the process in development and how these are used in cosmeceutical and nutraceutical formulation. And this is a real example how research institutions work, not only doing a fundamental research for publication and knowledge creation, but also taking a solutions and delivering it to the company and making in economic benefits. So one thing I normally say to a lot of our own researcher, studying a problem or studying a solution will give you publication, whereas finding a solution will give you a process which can be either patented or can be used commercially. For instance, what are the different factors which can influence the yield of fucoidin? That is there in publication domain. What exact condition is required to obtain that is a sensitive information. Now again, I've seen this aquaculture production of seaweed, and the drying system what we used was again airborne acoustics, fluidized bed drying, as well as microwave drying, as you can see this commercial scale microwave. And by using different types of drying technique, we could see which drying time is, which technique is taking less of drying time and how much energy it is utilizing. So that is the basis of selecting different drying techniques, or else fresh seaweed using hydrodynamic cavitator and then to convert into a form of slurry for subsequent processing. So what did we learn from these two processes about biotransformation and value addition? Is to have a zero, because zero was invented by India. If you see this one, sustainable exploitation is challenging, though achievable. Transformation and translational approach. By this means how we can transform one raw material into another multiple ingredients, or translation approach. That means the approach what you have seen here of seaweeds is not a completely new setup, but it has been adopted from other streams. Same way, if we see some of the established processes and how we can use that one to translate the same process to other areas. And we learn a lot from our own dairy industry to achieve that. Technologies are available, but but requires innovative translation. That means not a single technology will be suitable for almost everything. So it will require circular economy and biorefinery approach. That means one food processor will need to work with other sectors to come up with the complete biorefinery concept, what has been present here. So three key conclusions from this. One is zero waste approach is possible and can be achieved. Not to be dependent on one single technology. That's the reason when we talk about technology, each technology is having its own plus and minus, and depending upon our process and our requirement, we have to use it. And third, one particular researcher or one particular group cannot complete everything. We need a collaborative and collaborative and multidisciplinary approach over here. So with this, I conclude sustainability, sustainable exploitation, and coming with zero waste approach. We covered how we reduce by using processing technique as well as extraction technique. Now I'm happy to take the questions if there are any. And there was one of the question in the afternoon, in morning session, and yeah, and that question was, can we prioritize the protein requirement amount to the need of economic development? Yes, certainly we can, depending upon the priorities. There are some national priorities and international priorities, and whatever may be the case, there is always whatever may be the case, there is always a protein requirement, whether it's for food purpose or feed. As far as I know, in most of the protein was coming in as a part of soybean from China, but due to their own in-house demand, the protein supply to other countries has been restricted. So it is required, and it will have furthermore requirement. So yes, it can be done. That's the answer is simple. Are there any further questions? Any other question? So if there are no further questions, what I have to do is I have to cover a bit of microbial inactivation kinetics, just to demonstrate how best we can use it for obtaining D values and from non-thermal technique in a much easier approach. So I can take maybe a 10 minutes break, and we come back to the microbial inactivation kinetics. And I also wanted to cover one or two the soft skills, especially related to how to be an effective PI, as well as how to make an effective publications. So possibly effective publication element will be there, and I'll check with our organizer when is it. So I think we'll come back in maybe in 10 minutes time, and we'll start with microbial inactivation kinetics, and that will be mainly on Excel, and I'll have some of those papers which we'll be sharing. And it is advisable to look at those websites and how do we download it, an easy way of developing kinetic models. Many thanks. So welcome back. So it's actually a couple of things which are still missing, which I wish to cover now. Is one of the thing is about new technologies. So I will have a link sent to you all by our course organizer and local team looking after this. But one of the important aspect which is would like to share with you is to have a read of this particular paper. Yeah, sorry, I have to share the screen. Is here to go through this particular paper, which talks about guidelines on reporting treatment conditions for emerging technologies in the food processing. So it almost includes a lot of different authors from all over the world, and we talk about range of different techniques. whether it's the key parameters required for IR heating, thermal technologies, microwave, what is required for dielectric constant, and all those, everything is listed out here. So these are some of the parameters which are required for reporting different parameters for different technologies. It includes both thermal and non-thermal techniques. So link of this paper or the whole paper can be sent to you for your own consideration, and that will help you in achieving that. Now, the main main thing related to that is, again, what way the technology should be reported and what are the working principles, how it works, and if you're publishing a paper, and what all you should mention while reporting these technologies if you're using it for your own processes. So this is a very big paper and talks about almost every processing condition with all the non-thermal and thermal technologies. So for example, if you look at here for ultrasonic, frequency, electric, acoustic, cavitation energy, sample flow characteristics, liquid. So if you have mentioned all these type of parameters while reporting your experimental condition, then your acceptance of that particular work and further optimization or further scale up is easy to achieve. Now, another thing what I wanted to cover here about inactivation models. So if you look at the inactivation models, like what happens, like if suppose if you have inactivation curves, for instance, if you do a microbial inactivation, so most of the time, the microbial inactivation curves do not follow first order kinetics. For example, if you see this particular data, for example, if you look at this particular data and you carry out an experiment for different time points, irrespective of type of the condition you employ, and then if you plot this particular scatter plot, what you see a curve something like this. So normally in most of the cases what happens, sorry about that. Normally in most of the cases what happens, sorry, there was a restart on Excel. Yeah, most of the cases when we try to obtain a D value here, so classically obtaining D value was just to plot log count, that is log reduction or log population, versus time at the bottom to obtain one log. But if we fit in exponential equation, which can always be easily done by using normal Excel, for that you don't need any specialized software, what happens, we obtain oh sorry, if font is not this is the font size here. Now if we get this K value here, and based on that we can obtain the D value. How to obtain this value? If you see any of the microbial equation, and unfortunately I will have to type it here on Word. Yeah. So if you look at the inactivation model equation, population at any time t is equal to initial population N0, that initial concentration, into exp, that is exponent, to minus kt. You all know, need not to go into the details of this particular equation. This is well known first order kinetic equation, whereas N0 is your initial population and Nt is population at time t. And if you remember, if your historic times, if you want to determine half-life, that means Nt is equal to 0.5 times of N0. Based on that, if you put in value, N0 cancels off, and we get value of half-life by putting T. So similarly, if you have to get D value, that means Nt will be 0.1 of initial population, that is 10% reduction. And then we can get from K, we can get a D value. What if we fit in non-linear, if we fit in first order kinetics to this? Unfortunately, what happens, the model line or equation is not covering almost all the point. So 1 log reduction over here is almost nearly about 6 or 7 or 8 minutes or 5 minutes, whereas 1 log over here, from if you take it from 3 all the way to 2, is more than 20-30 minutes. So in order to get a correct log reduction, we need to change the model. That model can be Weibull model or biphasic model, what you would have seen in a lot of different literature. So what is the easier way of fitting in those nonlinear model? For that, one of the technique what is out there is by using a freeware which is available freely online, and this is one of the paper which outlines that method. That was developed by our own colleague with whom we work a lot. That's called GinaFit. Now, how to use it, I'll go step by step with that, and that can fit and take care of different types of curve which happens due to inactivation. For example, this is first order, and then this is the tailing effect, and there is a solder effect, that means there is a solder before it starts actually causing inactivation, and then again based on type of curve. So when you do experiment, and most of the cases what I've seen, we think, oh, I did not do this particular treatment properly, so you try to adjust those points. So that is not the right approach. So there are mathematical models explained by a lot of different microbiologists to explain the curve. So in order to fit these curves easy, one is you need to have very robust script writing on MATLAB and all, and then you do the fittings. What another one is to use a simple tool to develop those models, because you can fit any data to any model. Well, or you can use a complex model to describe the data, but it should have some practical relevance. Practical relevance in terms of it should be telling you the behavior of it. For example, if inactivation is happening something like this, you have a long shoulder, and then there is a drop. There's a linear that is first order kinetics. That means if you are using your ozone, for instance, the majority of ozone is going in for use on in oxidizing the organic matter before it starts causing inactivation. In this, whereas in this case where there is a sharp decrease and then there's a tailing effect, that can be explained in one way. That means some of those population or the microbial population present in a product is having two different subgroup population. One is very heat liable in case of temperature, or is liable to ozone oxidation if you're using ozone, and then there is a resistance coming in. So how do we calculate those? So easiest way is, if you read through this paper, it will go step by step how do we use different type of model on Excel. Now I'll show you how we do it, and you try it, and if you have any further question, I'm happy to take those questions even now, and afterwards also you can feel free to contact me on that. Now if you look at that particular GinaFit, this is the particular website of sorry, what's it? Yeah, this is a particular website where it was developed. It is KU Leuven, and in order to download this freely, what you have to do is you have to have your name, organization name, your email address. Once you submit it, you get a link to download that. Once you download this, how it is, and then you save it on your desktop. I'll just quickly go through how we have to install that. And then for installing, you need to just open your Excel file, click on the file, go into the options, click your add-ins, press go, browse that particular and then locate that particular GinaFit XLA file. As you can see over here, it's there, it's given here. And then if you press OK, you have to take in solver add-in analysis tool pack. And the moment you press OK, and then what you will see is it is it gives you a disclaimer, something like this. GenaFit is a manual, comes with any warranty and all this, and then when you're using it, how do you have to cite this particular one? You agree. If you disagree, that's a different story. And then you are good to go. But and it will take some time. And if you look into the Excel file, it goes in with the where it is. So let me find it out for you 1 second. If you see here, I have to just restart the Excel file, and then it comes on in this as an add-in. Now, if you look at the example here, this is suppose the data what I was talking about. And if I copy this data, and paste it over here. So what I have to do in this case is just need to select this particular data and look for add-in GenaFit here, and you select a type of model. So it gives you option based on the required reference, that is Gerald 2000, Marfarat 2002, Albert Marfarat, and different authors who have come up with different models. If I pick a Weibull model, and what it does, it it runs that particular Weibull model, and it will give you your sorry. Where is the data going? And then it runs that particular model and gives you various options like this. So delta, that's a D value, P, that's a shape factor, and it gives you all the vital statistics, whatever is required for evaluating the model. And the reference to that particular model is also provided here. So that's based on that, you can use a simple tool to generate that particular model. So I repeat, it's basically whole of the process related to GenaFit models is provided in this particular reference. GenaFit, a freeware tool to assess nonlinear microbial survival curves. And this is really important because to calculate correct D value or inactivation profile. And all the steps what I have gone through quite quickly, and it's really slightly challenging when it is done on a computer and demonstrating it. Whereas when you read through this particular process, you see GenaFit, different models. This is what I exactly did. And then it talks about different models, how these are used. That is again related to normal linear model, followed by biphasic model or different types of model in order to obtain your D value, and then the statistics, what this provides you and what does it mean. And based on this particular paper, you can fit in all the models, and this is what exactly the output what you get, which is written on a paper, as well as whatever is seen here. Exactly the same thing you obtain. And then once you have this, and you can report different parameters in a manuscript, and you can cite this particular paper. We have used this type of this technique and even this Excel add-in for a lot of microbial inactivation kinetics, because every time the kinetics, what we get the data depending upon the temperature or any of those external factors, whether it's temperature, pH, or temperature, pH, high pressure, pressure values, treatment time, all these factors, they determine what type of the shape a microbial curve will have, whether it's having two populations or it's having a solder or it's having a specific D value or a shape factor that determines the microbial inactivation curve. And this is the easiest way of using this. And this particular add-in was made as a part of a research project for predictive modeling in food, which was supported obviously by different research institute. So with this short description of the technique, I think you're strongly advised to read through this paper, download that particular GenaFit, and try to model your data. And any of those complex data can be easily modeled by using this particular technique. So I wonder if you have any questions related to that. Yeah, because I'm getting some of those questions which are obviously not related to this particular technical topic, and I will answer these questions maybe today or maybe tomorrow related to that. And these are generic questions, whatever are here, and about requirements and procedures for PhDs and other one. So that will be basically, we'll discuss maybe tomorrow at some point. But today, if you have any of those technical questions related to microbial activation kinetics using a simple tool, what has been shown here as a GenaFit, or any of those technological questions, please feel free to post it now. And there was another question which was on duckweed. So I have a few slides for the person who was interested in that particular duckweed research is over here. Now, if you see, this is the duckweed cultivation, and this particular duckweed, which is normally we see is grown in most of the lakes over here. And in this particular lake, this is intentionally grown for having the treatment of the wastewater, or even it can be grown on fresh water. And this particular duckweed is harvested and is converted into value-added product. So this is what you can see. This is particularly basically aeration is happening, and there are a lot of fish within it. And because fish also consumes this particular duckweed, and commercially this particular duckweed is cultivated in US and Israel, and it's having almost 30 to 40 tons per hectare and can go up to 55 tons. And there are a lot of different types of duckweed cultivations. And what are the benefits? There is no competition with the crop for lands, obviously, because we are using a water source. Rapidly it grows, doubling time is almost 1 day or 2 days. Use CO2 in the air, so that means it can sequester the CO2. Lower energy requirement, and moreover, it converts inorganic form of nitrogen into organic form in a form of a protein. And there is no big, massive problem of harvesting it and having low biorefinery cost. And as you can see, what has been presented here, and this is a particular duckweed cultivation, which is one of the model farm to show complete zero waste approach and as a settling tank. And this is the person who just was collecting sample for us. And this is the aerial shot of the duckweed farm, an open area, and how this duckweed is cultivated in county of Lee. That's the way it is pronounced. And then how it looks like is something like this. And there are different species, Lemna, Olphia, Sporidilla, and different types of species. I'm not going to go into details of their botany, how much time, temperature, pH it requires to grow, and also amount of nutrition or nitrogen, phosphorus it can convert. And it can double, as I said, in 48 to 96 hours. That means between 2 to 4 days, it's almost doubles, and it's very easy to harvest. And as far as its nutritive value is concerned, as you can see, it contains nearly about 36% protein, which is very high, and plus fiber and fiber, fat, and other carbohydrates. And where it is used generally, it is used for both for biofermentation, starch production, flavonoids, proteins, for food and feed, as well as for bio-based chemicals. And again, the amino acid profile related to duckweed is much almost comparable to soybean, which is used as a food purpose and also contains a lot of lipids. And type of research what is ongoing at the moment: fresh duckweed, Lamna minor, this is one of the species which we use, and then freeze-dried product which can be used for protein extraction, and by using different techniques, how best we can make value-added products out of it. So this answers your duckweed question. And if you have any further questions related to non-thermal technologies, extraction technologies, biotransformational approaches, or related to sustainable exploitation of biological or bioresources, please feel free to ask at this stage. So if there are no further questions, I have just one of the element which I wish to cover. That's basically a soft skill related to the question which has been posted, and also for how to look for research funding for academic research, or how to be an effective PI. This is one of the soft skill which I normally cover in most of the cases wherever researchers are involved, mainly for involved in PhD, or involved in for post PhD, for postdoc positions, or also for funding for research. So first and foremost, what is the key message? This is one of the most important point done by said by two greatest people on this earth. One is by Bill Gates. I believe in innovation, and that the way you get innovation is you fund your research and you learn the basic facts. And then the most important one is, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it yourself. This is the most important thing. So the key message here is, keep it as simple as possible. Whether it's a research publication, or you're doing any of the presentation, or you're writing for research funding, you have to make things very simple. There is no point in using complex English jargons, which for that, if person is reading it, they have to go and look into the dictionary. For example, I was looking at one of those project applications. It was written, we'll do this A, juxtapose B. It can be said, we'll do A side by side B. Juxtapose means side by side. So we can use always simple language, and simple is the best way of communicating the message and to make it understandable. Now, whether it's a research paper, or which we'll be talking obviously tomorrow, being gained a lot of experience lately by handling the Journal of Food Processing and Preservation for almost 7 years now. So same thing applies for research funding. This is coming in basically a cartoon from Science magazine. So how do you classify yourself? Are you a big talker, slave driver, or demigod? So this is one of the most important thing. Or control freak, science wonk, or laid back. Make it quick. I got it 2 tea times. Why don't you try this? Or control freak, why didn't you use 25 millimolar NaCl in your second wash? So these are some of the classification. Or Psychia, small town grocer, or rising star. So you have to classify yourself, where do you fit in, based on when you look for different types of principal investigator. That means if you want to become a principal investigator, either you talk big, do nothing, or you just have a time-bound thing, or you are obviously have to power and prestige to have a better job prospect, and for that reason you want to become a PI or you look for funding agency. So this is important thing to see where do you fit yourself when you're looking for being a principal investigator. So what I'll do is these two key messages, put yourself where you stand, and the fundamental message here is to keep it simple. What we'll do in this next 30 to 45 minutes is to go for research innovation, grant preparation, sources for funding, and conclusions. So this is my, you have seen for last 4 days, this is my hallmark of having same type of graph, and just keep changing the images in the center. So that's you can think in some cases I become a laid back, need not to come up with inventive way of giving the presentation overview. So those 9 ways of classification for a PI stands true for almost everybody. For certain things, I come in A, certain things I came into the 9th category, and in some cases I come into 6th category. So it depends upon the source. So presentation overview, first one is research innovation. Now, what is a research and what is a innovation? So again, this is my gears, which is always I keep using it. So here again, since we were talking about new technologies and a range of different technologies, so that's basically taken as a conversion system. One is knowledge. When we use this particular knowledge and convert that knowledge into revenue, we call it innovation. And same time, the same revenue, once you generate revenue, and same revenue is used to carry out the research to create a knowledge. So that's the difference between innovation. Innovation does not mean to come up with something new. That is basically invention, or that's basically a breakthrough invention or so. Innovation, where we use research knowledge to generate a revenue, and when we use that revenue to fund our research, whether in the form of a PhD or a postdoc or any of those research project to create a knowledge. Once knowledge is created, we use that knowledge to develop innovative processes. Now, if you look at this particular graph, and it's been divided based on different technology readiness level, starting from simple idea. I got an idea, concept developed, proving the concept, technology validated in a lab, technology validated in relevant environment, demonstrated in relevant environment, in demonstration in operational environment, system complete and qualified, a successful mission and operation. That means 9.1 is deployment of the technology and in full scale for commercial adoption or for use commercially. All the way, everything starts from idea. So that means from idea to successful mission cannot be completed in one single day. So when we use a publicly funded research or different research grant, so the main concept is something like this, whereas public research money is used mainly for blue sky research or fundamental research. These 1 to 3 can be classified as fundamental research. 4 to 6 is mainly related to your applied research, and 7, 8, 9 is all deployment research, that is commercial research. So majority of the public research funding, whether it's obtained here in NIT or IITs or any other research institute, is mainly for fundamental and applied research. Whereas when industry is putting in money, they would like to see more of the research which is coming in from the commercial aspect. So there is a lot of difference between the research source of funding. So accordingly, we have to develop approach. So business talks about competitive R&D, whereas public fund is just mainly for fundamental and applied research. And there is always a push from both the end. And there is a big gap between fundamental applied research and industrial research. So one of the main reason why, what the objective of this particular organization where I work is all related to bridging the gap between academic research and industrial requirement. So we have to really understand that majority of the cases when we deal with the researcher working on industry funded projects, oh, I can't publish it. Yes, because it's having some of the sensitive information. Whereas fundamental research or applied research will take a lot of time before it is seen as a benefit by the industry. Now, if you look into the grant ecosystem, it's universities, private R&D, basic research starts. We have proof of concept and different technology readiness levels, like you get different concepts, funding, and then once you have some of the output, either you transfer it to the industry or you start your own companies or transfer it to companies to generate royalties and license fee, or to reinvest into the research. Now, when it comes to this, what are the output of the research? The output of research, one is the publication, getting a PhD degree or having a tenure completion for promotions and all, or to develop patent. So this is a normal vicious circle which continues. That means money comes in. Based on that, royalty comes in, the spin-off and transportation to the company, as technology transfer to the industry, and this is the circle what we get. And during that process, there's always a wealth creation, jobs, products, and profits. This is what is important aspect for output of the research. And another outputs are publication, that is creation of knowledge, PhDs, that means creating trained manpower, tenures, that means excelling in your career pathway, or a patent, which is again responsible for spin-off in a companies. Now, if you see this diagram, what I was talking about right from the day one, is from the basic research to the commercial system. And this is basically one of the comfort zone where most of the researchers, including ourselves, are happy enough to do the lab research in a silo in a lab. Whereas when you're working with an industry, it becomes very challenging. For every day, you have to have a lot of challenges to address, and for them, time is money. The industry cannot wait for 4 days before you go, and industry cannot wait for 4 years before you complete your PhD and say, the money what we received from you, we completed a PhD. That means nothing for them. So the next step here was grant preparation. Now, the grant preparation required is either you are preparing your research project proposal, whether it's a PhD proposal, postdoc proposal, for academic project, or for commercial funding. First and foremost is the target. Know your funding stream, know the guidance, read eligibility and plan. So projects are not funded just only based on the idea. Projects are also funded based on the need. Suppose Environment Ministry is asking for a project to mitigate environmental problem. There, if you go and say that I use ultrasound for extraction of bioactives from apple, makes no sense. So first and foremost is to target. That's starting point. Second, know your funder, their mission, vision, and values, and know your audience. That means where it is going to go. So whether it's a PhD, postdoc, or any type of research, knowing the target, knowing your audience, and then developing your grant application based on the reviewer's requirement, and always follow the evaluation criteria. Once you follow evaluation criteria, it's always good to read your proposal. And many of the researchers, they do not read their proposal and they won't show it to the third person, thinking they will lose the idea. That's not the question here, because even the proposal goes to somebody to review, they have to sign a confidentiality agreement, and then finally submit it. And to avoid last minute submission, now in some cases you can submit and resubmit, and this submission to avoid last minute submission does not hold true even for me. And I always wait. Majority of my project application has been submitted in last 20 minutes or last 10 minutes. And the latest one which I submitted was at 11:59, and whereas the deadline was at 12 o'clock Irish time, that means 1 o'clock Central European time. So it's easily said than done. But most important element here is to know the target, what you're targeting, because most of the PhD and a postdoc project proposals are written in such a way that you are receiving a training. It is not that you are going to reinvent a wheel. So that's you have to be very sure of. Academic research, whether it is fundamental or applied, majority of the commercial research is mostly applied, so it has to be written in that fashion. Now, so grant writing process: idea generation, developing initial hypothesis, locating research equipment, testing feasibility, then securing your funds, that is location, funding source, making research team, writing grant proposal, experiment analysis. In some cases, the project funding is based on prior experiments, so you may have to do some of the experiments before you write it onto a proposal in order to demonstrate the feasibility. Then a research project, that's technical report, sourcing, technology, patents, journal article, interstitialization, and then evaluating both internal and external. And this is being taken, understand, from one of the paper that is talking about understanding scientific research life cycle based on bio and nanoscientist research activities. That was very interesting paper which talks about research ecosystem. And then information seeking activities, again, journal articles, grant workshop, researcher database, lab equipment, experimental techniques, and different databases for getting information. And then again, looking for different activities from idea, funding, making team, experiment analysis, and coming out with the project proposal. So if you look at if you look at this particular flow diagram, this is one of the most straightforward linear model. That means you do a research. What are the research outputs you obtain? One is discovery, which is really not in almost every project happens. What really happens out of all project is the publication. So some project we get patents, in some cases we get intellectual properties, that is IPs. Then research is transferred, engagement with the end user, outcome, new or improved processes, services, or product, services, or processes. And then research impact, value added improvements achieved, national, international benefit. So linear model, but more complex in a real world. This is not really exactly the way it works. Varies across all discipline, is less likely, is more or less tangible, takes time, but there may be intermediate outcome on the way. Evidence, need to monitor, collect evidence for every stage. So this is what it tries to convey over here. Whatever research we do, does it really creates an impact? Does publication alone creates an impact? Yes, it does, because this increases the research profile of a country and as well as the institution. And once it is a patent and IPs are there, will definitely have a national and international improvement. Now, coming to the proposal writing, these are the key steps which we have to follow. First one is reading the guidelines to the applicant. In majority of the cases, we do not read the guidance to the applicants, and at least 30% of projects are rejected just because the guidelines are not followed. By guidelines, that does not mean only related to the font size, number of text, and number of word limit and all, but also depends upon the call requirement, the scope, and evaluation criteria. If the call is related to nuclear physics, you cannot put nutrition and food science. That's what it means. Develop an idea and align it to the funding call. So that means whatever is the vision and mission of a funding call, your idea should be aligned with it. If it is not aligning, you have to demonstrate in the project application that is how it is aligning. Develop a timeline for a proposal development and writing of the proposal. Talk to the previously successful applicant if possible, and look at their proposal if they are able to show it to you. Arrange a peer reviewers to provide feedback on a draft proposal. Identify and engage early and with any local or central administrative support if you need financial support or if you need budgetary support. And simple message here is keep it simple. And the university where I have adjunct position, they have a proper portal which talks about how to write your research proposal. And that is very important to go through that and to follow these steps, because sometimes we write a proposal to look more fancy, and then whatever look glitters is not always gold. So keeping that phrase in mind, we only write whatever is possible and why it's been done before we just write we'll make something out of something. So that's important. Third element here is sources for grant. This is now important because some of the questions were also there about PhD funding and requirements. Now, if you look at this research and innovation landscape, so what are research innovation landscape? This is again publication from UK Parliament. That's the universities, the university enterprise zone are businesses. So you have a range of different agencies, whether it's EU, government, or universities, different research councils, Innovate UK or IKC. The similar type of arrangement is over here, which talks about research and innovation. Innovation is mainly associated with businesses, and research is mainly associated with universities, but there is no clear-cut demarcation related to that. When it comes to the funding agency, and unfortunately, I can only talk about sources of funding when it is coming in from the European perspective, because that's the system what I'm a bit familiar with. So there are a number of different pillars when it comes to Europe, and anybody can apply for it. And if you think you have a brilliant idea, and you are a brilliant idea, you can do something wonder. So for excellent science, there are three key agencies. One is European Research Council, which talks about the starter, consolidators, and advanced grant, and they are in tunes of over 2 million. And if one of our former colleague, she was a postdoc and she obtained a starters grant for ERC, and she was given a straightaway professor's position. So that's just the way it valued. Another one is Marie Curie Fellowship, and that is open for everybody internationally. You just need to find a host institution and you have to develop a proposal. Current proposal limit is only 10 pages. And if you develop good proposal, either if you are on your own or if you are with a family, you get a family loading and anywhere salaries from 60,000 to 70,000 euros a year is possible for that. Apart from that, there's an industry funding and some of those societal challenges. These type of funding agencies are mainly for those who are based in Europe, but anybody who wish to pursue the postdoc or to become Marie Curie Fellow, it's either European Training Network, European Industrial Doctorates, or European Joint Doctorates. Individual fellowships, the first three what I mentioned are mainly for PhDs, and other ones are individual fellowships, and they are quite competitive, but at the same time they are mainly based on science as well as based on the individual CV. So this is again for Horizon Europe. This is not really relevant for Pillar 2 and Pillar 3, mainly for industry and the researchers based in Europe. Whereas Pillar 1, European Research Council or Marie Curie Fellowship, these two are the important one for anybody from any country, and there is no barrier for any, or there is no geographical barrier. Anybody can apply for those. So when it comes to fellowship for Marie Curie, these are the fellowship to or moving within Europe. That means European fellowship, that means person is moving from one European country to another European country, or person is moving from Europe to anywhere in the world for 2 to 3 years, and which also includes 1 month coming back to Europe. That means you go out of Europe to another international location and come back to Europe. That global fellowship is mainly for the people who have been living in Europe for more than 3 years, whereas European fellowship is for the fellows coming to Europe or moving within the Europe. So if you are planning to apply from India, then this is the fellowship which is which is the best for them. So in this case, you have to select an institution and you have to select an PI, develop the proposal, and then apply for it. And it takes 3 to 4 months before results are announced, and you can always defer. That means if you normally the deadlines are somewhere in September and October. And obviously, remember this one, this is very competitive and it talks about excellent CV and a good project with good host. These are 3 key pillars related to that. Project length is very short, it's only 10 pages. And this year we have 2 new Marie Curie fellow coming in, and one is coming from India, another one is coming in from Korea. They both started recently, so these are quite competitive. Then again, apart from that, there are certain other national funding agencies, that is Science Foundation Ireland. Like this is the National Science Foundation Ireland, where also there are some of the funding which are available for people who are willing to apply for postdoctoral position, whether SFI, that Science Foundation Ireland, European Research Council, SFI Starting Investigators Grant, or Royal Society Science Foundation Ireland. So here also, again, in some of those funding calls, people can individually apply for these national calls and pursue their postdoctoral career. Other way around is if there is vacancy from a project, then you have to apply to like a job. And other cases, if you have, if you think you have a very good project in your mind and you can use it for, and you can secure a funding, then best is to try your luck with Marie Curie or for such funding agencies. Third step here is on career fit. This is the new, this is the really new way of starting, which includes researcher of any nationality who was not in mainland in Ireland and for more than 12 years or 3 years prior to call deadline. You apply for any of those research technology center and you work for 36 months. That means 2 years in academic institution, that is maybe Chagas, UCD or any of those institution, and 1 year in industry. So that includes over 65,000 per annum of euros of salary. And if you have a family, that means that gives you a family loading as well. And then training and networking expenses of 10,000, close to 10,000 euros per year. And it happens every year. So this is another one. And majority of these funding agencies, whatever I have listed here, and there are some new ones are coming in and they keep coming in and going. But most of these documents are published at the European website, and majority of those funding project application are aligned either with the United Nations Sustainability Development Goal, Gender in EU Funded Research, SHARP, that is Sustainable Healthy Agri-Food Research Plan, Innovation 2020, now it's gone to 2023. Food-wise, our Chagas Foresight exercise. And these are some of the strategic document which talks about where the research has to go and what areas are required. So mainly the key focus is on excellent research, the strong, innovative and internationally competitive enterprise base, renowned pool of talents in Ireland, public research system and in industry, a coherent joint up innovation ecosystem. So this is all to do with excellence, innovation and excellence in science. Other funding agencies are again related to OECD. OECD, again, they also come up with a lot of different types of funding agents, funding schemes, whether it's for PhDs or postdoc. And for that, if you are interested in, it is best to look for oecd.org. That can, and obviously there are certain geographical restrictions in certain countries cannot participate in OECD, but in some of the funding agencies, anybody from any nationality can go into OECD countries. This is another scheme. And the most important and interesting one, what I came across, is also related to findaphd.com or findapostdoc.com. So these are the two websites which most of the time the list funded and non-funded PhDs or a postdoc program. So one thing is important to understand here. When a PhD is carried out, it is very, very important, more than an institute. It is really important how you carry out your PhD, what is your learning curve, and what is your research output. Do you understand that research, or you just location? Because location or universities not all the time plays an important role for driving your career. It is all based on individual perception. So even again, if you see findapostdoc.com or findaphd.com, you can find range of different schemes which are coming in on daily basis. And the last part here is again on to conclude. Here is always be cool, try until you succeed or stand out from the crowd. So that means when you're writing any research proposal, so be sure that what you are doing is not just taken from 3 different projects and coming up with a new proposal. That's not science. It's just and it's very easy to find it out. So it has to be innovative, it has to be new, it has to be simple. That's very, very important for looking for grant hunting. And meanwhile, whosoever, and if you have any interest or so, and feel free to drop me an email, but you may have to bear at times, because since I've been away from Europe for almost now 15-20 days, so it may take longer time for me to respond to emails. But when it looking for a PhD applications, PhD or a postdoc position, all these informations are presented on organization websites or some of those links what I mentioned here, and you'll be able to see any of those opportunities arising. Okay, thank you very much. So I think with this we conclude altogether today's session, and most probably we'll start tomorrow morning on how to do an effective publication, and then we'll see according to the plan. And this is and are there any questions so far? So anyway, there are 2 questions here, which I planned to answer it yesterday. Answered it. Was thinking to answer it tomorrow. I'll just answer it now. The first one, it says, what is the requirement and procedure to apply for a PhD in Dublin? Procedure is simple. It just, if you look at the vacancy and you just follow the guidelines, in majority of the cases, you just have to send a CV. And either it depends upon the PI. If you take an interview, then you have to follow that interview process, and then that is it. There's no exams related to that. Second one is, which country or university is the topmost for doing PhD in food technology? Oh, okay. This particular question, that means every university is the best university to do a PhD. I believe in one thing: donkeys and horses are available in every country. The same way, every institution, there are best people. Institutions are known because of people, not because of the building, but based on research. If NIT is a renowned institute in technology, it's all because the researchers working over here, not because of infrastructure, not because of having a good canteen or having a good buildings. So in my opinion, it's my own personal perception, every institution is good, but depends upon how you perform there. Any other question?
Thank you, sir, for all the efforts you have made for preparing this informative lecture. And I hope that this module would have helped all the participants in getting new insights. We remind all the participants to prepare the assignment and send us to the email ID gian.nitrfp@gmail.com before 8 p.m. today as intimated to you through the mail. We would also like to bring to your notice and remind you that the participant score for this course will be awarded in the certificates based on your performance in the aforementioned exercise. Best of luck with the assignment. And with that, we wind up the day 4 of the short-term Gyan course. We'll meet tomorrow sharply at 9 a.m. Wish you all a good day. Thank you.